JKB back with another episode. Today on the show, I'm talking about Legend of Zelda's 35th anniversary. This is something that obviously means a lot to me. I do have a Triforce tattoo, which, that doesn't mean shit, but it means that it means a lot to me. It doesn't mean I'm trying to be cool, which I'm not cool at all. If you knew me in personal, realistic situations, you'd be like, this guy's a loser. So, in saying all of that, Legend of Zelda was a huge inspiration to my life growing up. Now I'm going to go over the history of how I got into Legend of Zelda and how I got into the games and what they meant to me and which games I don't like, what I like. We'll go over all that, but comment below. Let me know, what's your favorite Zelda game? There's a ton of them. Some of them aren't so great, and I'm not super excited about like Skyward Sword HD remake or whatever the hell it is for the Switch. But we're hearing rumors that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are going to come over HD to the Switch as well. So let's just discuss some things here. How did I get into Legend of Zelda? Well, I grew up in a small town called Barrie, Ontario, and I never had an NES. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I never owned an NES. And some people are going to be like, what? Well, I did own one after the Super Nintendo, but I never owned an NES when Legend of Zelda was a big deal because I'm actually 40 years old, so I was about 5. So it kind of just missed me. I was more of a Super Nintendo, person and a Genesis and, Sega Master System. But in saying all of that, the first system I had was Sega Master System, which I'm going to talk about in an episode coming up. But the first time I played Legend of Zelda wasn't at my own house. I was actually at my friend's house who owned a Super Nintendo. The game had come out. I saw the case and I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, you remember Zelda? Yeah, of course I remember Zelda. We started playing it. I became so obsessed. Time for some more wine. Let me just jump into my favorite Legend of Zelda game of all time, which is tied. It's tied now because Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo is a game that I played so much that I don't think you guys would actually believe how much time I put into that game. Now, in saying that, Breath of the Wild is unbelievable. We all know that. There's some things people don't like about it, like the weapons that break, and you gotta constantly get new weapons, which some people just can't handle that. I like that. I don't mind it. In saying that, though, Breath of the Wild is definitely my favorite Zelda game of all time as well. It's hard to kind of take those two apart because in this game, it is essentially a remake of the original game, but in full 3D with amazing mechanics and amazing, physics and all of that stuff. You know how good it is. But Link to the Past was the first adventure game that I really got into as a young kid. On the Super Nintendo, there was a lot of weird RPGs at the time that I didn't quite understand. And to this day, there's some that I haven't even played. But going back in time in my head is kind of difficult because I'm getting old. I'm 40 now, and I don't remember a lot. I do remember certain days that I would just spend on the Link to the Past game on Super Nintendo in my dad's basement, and I made him help me carry a TV from one room to the other so I could just be alone in a room. And I was just like sitting with 2 chairs, one with the TV, the system on the floor, and a controller in my hand, and this little table, and my nana would bring bananas and ice cream down, and I would just play Link to the Past. It was absurd. And it got to the point where I didn't leave my house, essentially, without having the ability to play it. I know this sounds insane, but I used to put my Super Nintendo in a backpack with the game in it, and I would go to my friend's house and be like, okay, well, where's your TV? Like, it was that insane that we would just sit there and play it constantly. And I have to say, it kind of speaks to young boys. It's kind of like this. I don't know if it has to do with upbringings. Not to get too personal here, but I grew up with a single parent. My mom raised me, so I didn't really have a father figure there. And I didn't really have a sense of anything, really. My mom did the best she could, but I didn't really understand a lot of things in life because I never really experience them because I didn't have a father figure saying, this is girls, this is how you get a career in life, or I never had any of that stuff. So Legend of Zelda, I know it sounds insane, but filled in a lot of gaps. Like, this sounds crazy, but I definitely learned what... This sounds crazy and embarrassing to say. I don't know why it's embarrassing to talk about this, but Zelda, yeah, I kind of had a crush on her, but it never was like I thought about Link getting to her and then starting a family or anything. I just thought it was like, I don't know, it was weird. It was like romance. When I was growing up, I was like, oh, this is what romance is. Because again, I didn't have a father figure there, and my mom didn't really talk to me about that stuff, so I had nothing. I just based it all on video games. So when the story starts out, you're there to essentially save this princess, right? And in Link to the Past, you're there to save a whole bunch of them. Well, not princesses, but a bunch of women that are trapped in crystals and all sorts of things. But it's one of these weird things I look back on and I think, well, maybe this taught me a lot more about sort of being a gentleman and adventuring and doing things for women. And I don't know if people are going to be pissed that like women don't need help with anything. They're strong enough, which they are totally. I'm not saying that they aren't, but I'm saying like it taught me that. It taught me like respect. It taught me like, yeah, open the door for women. I know this sounds crazy, but this is how I thought about it in my head. I thought, wow, he's going out of his way to like help this princess? Like, he must really care about her. And remember, I was super young playing this game. So that's the biggest influence that Legend of Zelda had on me. And also, I guess the second one was about power. You know, because the Triforce is about a whole bunch of stuff if you really look into it. But I mean, it's power, courage, and wisdom. When you look into that as a young kid, you sort of get the sense that like maybe these things are important in life, and maybe you should be paying attention to, if you have the courage and you have the wisdom, you can have the power, or vice versa. And like, what can you do with that if you have it all? And Ganon sort of taught me like, oh, this is what happens when you try to take it and go down the wrong path. I understand it now a little bit more. And I know this sounds crazy to you guys, but I'm being fucking honest with you. This is how Legend of Zelda taught me certain aspects of my life. Now, let me get into some of the gameplay mechanics. I remember at the time getting into some of the dungeons and getting these weapons, and my mind was blown. I was like, oh my god, you're using something else than the sword, and it's going to play into the puzzles. And, you know, let's be honest, I absolutely hate the water temples in Legend of Zelda. I hate all of them, because they're so like tedious. I just don't like that in the game. But I mean, I understand it. It's sort of there to break up the pacing of the game. But I remember getting like into that temple and having the slingshot and being able to like go over the water using that. And my mind was blown at the time because I had like an inventory of these amazing weapons. And I remember thinking to myself, I better go and collect all of these, because if they're everywhere in the game, I'm gonna go nuts. And I did go nuts. I played that game non-stop for at least 4 or 5 months. And I mean, if I had to mark down how many hours I put into it, probably at least 600, 700, 800. I mean, I couldn't tell you. I remember there was days where I would just sit there for 10 hours playing the game, and my mom was like, it's time to stop playing. And I was like, it's time to get the fuck out of my room, because this is crack cocaine. So as the years went by, obviously my affection to Legend of Zelda remained, and I really got into the Wind Waker. When that came out at EB Games, I was the manager at EB Games at the time, and I actually made my own cases, and we had over 1,100 pre-orders for Wind Waker on the GameCube, which was #1 in all of Canada. And I pushed it so hard because I knew it was going to be something special. And there was a huge controversy when it came out because of the graphics. Some people didn't like the childish theme. You know, everybody always wants this Legend of Zelda that's like photorealistic, and he's slicing goblins' heads off and their balls off. And get real, Legend of Zelda can be whatever it wants to be. And I always thought that. So when this game came out, I was obsessed with this game. The open world was amazing on the sea. Being able to go out on the boat and just search for treasure in the water. It was just, that was alone just worth playing the game. And coming across all these islands and going on them, and I mean, that game is spectacular in its own right as well. So I think, I've talked about a couple of games here and there, and obviously Breath of the Wild is one of the major ones, but the reason I really want to do this video is to say thank you to Nintendo and all of the creators of Legend of Zelda that have made this series what it is today. Some of the games I just couldn't get into, like Skyward Sword was very frustrating for me. A couple of the DS games, I just couldn't get into them. And Twilight Princess was just a little like mucky on the Wii, right? Some people were like, it looks okay, but yeah, in saying all of that though, I mean, it's a franchise that's going to live on forever. I mean, as long as Nintendo's there, there's always going to be Legend of Zelda. And it's always going to be in my mind till the day I die. And I want to thank Nintendo. Once again, just thank you so much. 35 years of this, even though you forgot that it's the anniversary and there's no special announcement, unless it just happened while I was recording. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments below again, what's your favorite, least favorite, why are you excited about today? And I'll get back to you in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next episode of JKB.